Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook and today in Pod 22 I'll be looking at a result of a Chelsea by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you an exclusive interview with Alan Pardew and Wayne Hennessy after the game. So let's begin. Diego Costa's header 3 minutes before half-time was enough for Chelsea to claim their 11th straight win at the expense of Palace at Selhurst Park. The Premier League's top scorer pounced late on in the first half to head the Blues ahead, and it would be a lead that they wouldn't surrender as a rock-solid backline refused to be breached. Indeed, some good saves by Wayne Hennessy would keep Alan Pardew's side in the game, but despite Marco Alonso bending a free kick against the crossbar late on, the Eagles would end their final home game of 2016 with a defeat. A quiet first half saw Palace enjoy plenty of possession in the Eagles' half, but unable to carve out a decent opportunity, the first fell to Palace on 20 minutes. Yohan Cabaye found himself with time and space in the middle of the Chelsea half and played a good pass into the path of Martin Kelly on the right. The fullback produced a fine first-time cross into the area, which picked out Jason Puncheon in the box, but he screwed his chance horribly wide. The game continued in similar vein, and on another attack forward on 38 minutes, a similar move saw Kelly once again deliver a good cross into the area where James McArthur was advancing, and even though he got his head to the ball, it drifted well wide of the target, and soon after Puncheon bent a free kick over the top as the opportunities continued to fall the host's way. But just as they did on Wednesday, the Eagles conceded right before the half-time interval, as the Blues showed their class to net with their first real sight on goal. Eden Hazard dribbled around the Eagles' half and sprayed a pass out to Azpilicueta on the right flank. The defender took a touch before floating in a great cross into the area, and Costa managed to get away from his marker to loop a header over the stranded Hennessy and grab his 13th league goal of the season. Resisting the temptation to change anything at the interval, Pardew stuck with his team, and a minute into the second half, Cabaye caught a half volley sweetly and forced Thibaut Courtois into his first save of the afternoon. And then at the other end, Hennessy was forced to make a maiden stop when a blast from N'Golo Kante needed dealing with. The beginning of the second half belonged to Conte's side though. On 66 minutes, the two wing-backs combined as ex-Eagle Victor Moses saw a cross head backwards towards Alonso, who drove a volley into the side netting. But Palace showed they still had plenty to offer in the final third, when Christian Benteke saw a shot on the turn go straight at Courtois. However, they needed Hennessy to keep them in the game when Hazard once again caused problems in the box and found Moses, who teed up Kante on the edge of the area, but his low shot was kept out by the Palace keeper. And 2 minutes later he was at full stretch again to push a stinging shot from Alonso to safety, as Chelsea searched for the goal that would kill the game off. Only the woodwork denied them from doing that with 6 minutes remaining, when Alonso again went close when he stepped up to bend a free kick from the edge of the box, and he went off the crossbar with the rebound bundling its way back to Hennessy. There was one final chance for the Eagles when they won a free kick 30 yards out in injury time, but Andros Townsend blazed it into the Homestale Road stand as the best defence in the division held firm once again to continue their push for the title. There was no shame in this performance. Crystal Palace challenged Chelsea for much of the first half, but once they had fallen behind they found it incredibly difficult to break them down and toiled throughout the second half. Now for some positives from the game. Palace battled well till the end and probably deserved more from the game given their dominance in the second half. But thankfully Palace's problems aren't coming from the flanks now. A weakness that had been obvious a few weeks ago had been re-amended by deploying Joe Ward at left back and Martin Kelly on the right, a move that arguably should have come sooner given how weak Kelly looked on the left. Now for some negatives from the game. The Eagles conceded the simplest of goals when a high cross into the box was badly dealt with by Wayne Hennessy, Scott Dann and Kelly. Indecision at the heart of Palace's drop in form continues to be the problem. Had either the keeper or defenders had been more decisive, Diego Costa's header might not have gone in. It was always going to be a tough task for Crystal Palace against runaway league leaders Chelsea, and so it proved as they lost out 1-0 at Selhurst Park. Diego Costa scored the only goal of the game for the Blues as he made it 11 wins in a row for the Premier League leaders, with Crystal Palace losing for the 8th time in their last 10 games. But what did we learn from the game? Here are 5 things. Number 1. Walkout? What walkout? Before the game, there were suggestions that some Palace fans may stage a walkout in the 21st minute of the game in reference to the 21 league defeats the Eagles had suffered in 2016 prior to this game. But there were no signs of Palace fans making their way to the exits on the 21st minute, with the Eagles playing well and frustrating the league leaders. Number 2. Keeping spirits high. There is no doubting that the Palace players remained together as they put together a spirited effort against the league leaders. There were a few cut chances for them, but the Eagles were relentless with their work rate as they chased and harried their opponents at every opportunity. Number 3. Same old story. Palace were playing well and were in the game, but they switched off and conceded just before the end of the half. It is becoming a recurring theme in recent weeks and is something that they simply have to rectify. Number 4. Kelly is on the right track. He's come in for some criticism from fans for his performances when debutising at left back this season. But when playing in his more natural position at right back here, he put in a great shift, keeping Chelsea at bay down the left hand side and getting forward and putting in some delightful crosses. Number 5. There's a reason they are top. This was not a vintage display from Chelsea, but they got the job done. And you can see why Alan Pardew said in his pre-match press conference that the Blues can be unbeatable at times, with Palace really troubling their back line, as Chelsea kept a 10th clean sheet of the season. So now you've had the match review, we're now going to move on to the player rankings. But before we start, don't forget to follow us across social media on Twitter and Facebook at @eCrystalPalace for all the latest news. And for all you Facebook users out there, don't forget to check out our Facebook group so you can join in with the latest discussions, read the latest news and post your own opinion. So like I said there, if you are on social media and you do want to get in contact with us, then of course you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook, and you can find them using the @eCrystalPalace. Now obviously I highly recommend you do join these groups or follow these pages because we do regularly update you with the latest news, and that is including transfer rumours, obviously with the run up to the January transfer window. So if you do want to keep up to date with all things Palace, including player and manager interviews, and obviously just having a say in our Twitter polls, then obviously I'd recommend you do follow us. Also, if you are on Facebook, I would highly recommend you do join the Facebook group, which you can find using the @eCrystalPalace group @. Now, obviously, I would recommend you do join the group because after the game, quite a lot of fans go on there to post their opinion on how the game went, anything they saw about the game, and obviously on players and how they thought the players felt. And obviously, you can go on there. It doesn't have to be after the game. You can actually post anything else you would like to discuss with other fans. So if you do obviously want to have your say on the game, or have your say on a player or a transfer rumour, or just have a look and hear what other fans had to say after the game, then of course you can join our Facebook group. And much like the other social media groups on Twitter and obviously the main Facebook page, we do regularly update it with the latest news. So obviously you can have your say on it, but also you can read the latest news and keep up to date with all things Palace. So obviously if you do want to follow or join any of these social media groups, then check the links in the description below, both on the YouTube video and the podcast on iTunes and Acast. If you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then of course you can drop a comment below the video on what you thought about the game and who you thought a standout player was, obviously the man of the match. And obviously we do want to hear what you had to say about the game and who you thought the best player was. And of course feel free to drop a comment below the video. Now obviously in the last few weeks I've set a challenge for listeners to do, and quite a few people have started to do it. And I've just asked people to list their player rankings and give me ratings of 1 to 10 for each of the players. Obviously 1 being the worst and 10 being the best. And obviously that is just a sort of you describing how you thought the players performed throughout the game. So this week, like every week, I want you to do the same thing. So drop a comment below the video with your player rankings. So obviously all of the starting 11 and the substitutes, and giving them ratings from 1 to 10 of, you know, what you thought or how you thought they performed throughout the game. And obviously by doing that, I can compare my ratings of the players to your ratings and actually see whether our sort of outlook was on the game and whether we thought the players had sort of similar performances, put in the same or the similar amount of effort. So, do feel free to comment below your player rankings and compare it to mine, but also just feel free to drop below, the comment on the video about who you thought the man of the match was, so the player with the biggest influence of the game, and just anything, about the game in general. But, I've said this already, if you do want to keep up to date with all things Palace, then of course don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. But enough of that now to go on to the player rankings. Starting in goal with Wayne Hennessy, who I'm going to give a 7. Partly culprit for the goal after being slightly out of position for Costa's header, but Dan looked more at fault, but then kept his team in the game with some excellent saves, particularly from Kante down the right. Did everything else alright. So obviously Wayne Hennessy here, I've given him a 7 because once again he's put in a very solid performance. And you could say because we lost the game, a goalkeeper doesn't really deserve to have a 7 or to have really a good saying at all. But certainly Wayne Hennessy put a good name out for himself, because, you know, we could say he was a culprit for the goal. You know, the fact that he came off his line too early, or he didn't go to catch the ball, whatever pundits or, you know, the goalkeeping coaches may think about what he should or shouldn't have done, you know, you could say he was wrong. But if you look back at the replay, it looks like Dan may be at fault as well, because Dan's sort of trying to mark the man and Dan should have been jumping. But my personal opinion on the goal, the cross has come in from Azpilicueta. You know, if you look back at the replay, Scott Dan looks to Wayne Hennessy to say, come on, claim the ball. But Hennessy sort of moves along the line, doesn't know whether to stay on his line or whether to claim the ball, which means that Dan is the one that has to try and jump to get Costa, by which, when this is all happening, by which time Costa's already got, you know, higher than Dan to head the ball in. So you could say both are at fault. The fact that Hennessy came off his line too early, or didn't stay on his line, or didn't claim the ball. But then you also could say that Dan was, you know, was fault as well for not communicating with Hennessy. But if, you know, I personally think it's sort of a mix-up between them, a miscommunication, let's say. The fact that Hennessy didn't know where he was going, didn't know whether he was staying on the line, going to claim the ball. And personally, looking at that, it wasn't really that high of a ball for Costa to header. So Hennessy could have either punched it out of the way or even caught it, because, you know, he's quite tall. But, you know, there was a big mix-up there. But then we talk about the mistake he made just before half-time. He kept the team in the game for the rest of it. So we could have lost this game, you know, maybe by a few more goals, maybe 3-0, because, you know, Costa or Chelsea got some very good attacking threats up front, but Wayne Hennessy kept us in the game like he's been doing in the last few weeks, you know, making some excellent saves, some from point blank range, some of them from low down, some were sort of inside the box. He got down low to make the saves, and the one in particular was from Kante. Obviously there was a lot of passing inside the Palace box, you know, Hazard to Victor Moses to Kante. Kante put a lovely shot into the goal, or into the area. Wayne Hennessy managed to get down low and stretch out to save it. So he's just showing that, yes, he did make that mistake, but he did keep Palace in the game when we were in that losing position, and he done that very well. And we talk about goalkeepers doing the basic things right. Hennessy, exactly that. You know, he did everything else well, except for that one moment where, you know, we just sort of fell down, let's say, and we conceded a goal. But just to talk about a few things he'd done, obviously I've given you the summary there, but I've talked about it already and talked about it last week. He does the simple things right, you know, getting down low to make saves. Obviously, an example of that is against Kante. He got down low, got on his knees, managed to dive and get the ball out. And obviously not spilling the ball. So we've seen with other Premier League goalkeepers this year, and Hennessy for that instance, you know, where the goalkeeper goes to make a save, they've made the save, but because they don't catch the ball or deflect it out for a corner, you know, the ball gets spilled back into the box and the team can score a rebound. Hennessy in this game didn't really do that, so it meant that there was no threat from loose balls inside the box. Obviously, you know, he was, as well as, you know, not spilling the ball, point blank range shot. So when the ball was coming in from right in front of him, he used his positioning well to try and, you know, block the shot. And obviously the only time he didn't, you know, command himself and wasn't positionally aware was obviously when they scored the goal. So that's what we need to work on. Yes, we were very good throughout the game, but especially the goalkeeper, they need to work out when they need to be in the right position, because one little error cost us in the game where actually we did match Chelsea and in some points dominated them. But, you know, he commanded well from set pieces. The set pieces has been a woe for Palace of recent weeks, you know, and of the season as well. We've been conceding lots of goals from set pieces. This game, we didn't concede a goal from set pieces. We conceded a goal, lovely crossing from the right flank into the area. So you could say that from the set pieces that Chelsea had, corners, free kicks, we did defend them quite well. Obviously good long ball distribution. So Steve Mondondo, we talked about when he came to the club, the reason he came to the club was just to add a little bit more, a different style to the way you play. So the fact that he can make long clearances. Wayne Hennessy, classic example of that. You know, we wanted to play a high press game, tried to sort of pin Chelsea back. We've done that well throughout the game, and one of the crucial players for that was actually Wayne Hennessy. You know, the fact that he could throw the ball quite long so that we could start up an attack, and that was quite good. That's what we've seen with Steve Mondondo, and that's why he was quite good in the way we were playing before he got injured. The fact that he could get the ball, get it really long to clear the danger, Wayne Hennessy done that. But, you know, the only one thing really to criticise him for his game, because he was superb, that's why I've given him a 7, making these saves, but we just need to make sure there's no miscommunication. So we need to make sure he has the constant communication with the defence, so that whether that be they're continually talking with each other, making hand signals, whatever they need to do. And obviously that will just make sure, by having that constant communication, make sure mistakes like the goal don't happen. Because I've said this already, we were dominant throughout the game, we pinned Chelsea back, we matched them for intensity, we've done all of that really well well, but then it was just one little mistake where there was a little bit of miscommunication where we conceded a goal. But certainly Wayne Hennessy, a 7 for him, a pretty decent performance, and other than the mistake or miscommunication for the goal, he had a very good game making saves. And I've said this in past weeks, is based on this current form, it's going to be pretty hard for Wayne Hennessy to get or to not go back to second choice goalkeeper when Steve Mandanda comes back. So Mandanda's going to find it very difficult based on Wayne Hennessy's current form to get back into the team. Obviously moving on now to the left back Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 7. Solid and took the threat of former Palace winger Victor Moses in his stride, limited him to a solitary chance. Also dealt with Hazard quite well. Nothing spectacular, but defended as normal. So obviously Joe Ward here, I've given him a 7 because once again, one of the most reliable players in the Palace team in a minute, was very solid. And obviously we talk about the threat of Chelsea, the attacking threat. Former Palace player Victor Moses has actually played a big part for Chelsea's attack this season, obviously popping in with a few goals. Obviously where he's playing sort of the wing-back role, he's getting crosses into the area and creating for the Chelsea attack. And obviously in this game, he didn't really have the chance to attack or to put crosses in because Joe Ward marked him very well. You know, Joe Ward did a pretty decent job at keeping his, threat to a minimum. And he only had 1 or 2 solitary chances, so he didn't really have any clear-cut chances. And obviously one of them was when he linked up with Hazard into the box, passed the ball to Kante, and obviously going back to Wayne Hennessy made the save. So, Victor Moses was very well marked by Joe Ward, making sure that he didn't have any chances. And obviously Joe Ward, again, dealing with Hazard. So Hazard was quite involved in the game, maybe not the man of the match, but he was linking up the midfield. He had the sort of flexibility to move around wherever he wanted to move in the pitch. But Joe Ward, when he had to deal with Hazard on the wing or on the flank or down the middle, he done everything well. He made sure he was marking his players, stopping the crosses and passes, getting into the box. So all of this stuff he done just, shows us how solid and how the defence is getting better. But obviously we talk about defenders doing the simple things right. Joe Ward, a classic example of that, and he's getting better and better as the weeks go on, obviously, as is the whole defence. But nothing spectacular. He didn't do anything spectacular throughout the game, but he defended as normal. He made the tackles, he made the blocks, which meant that the Chelsea attack, which has been very prominent this season, very potent, let's say, he made sure that Victor Moses, Hazard didn't really get, chances to attack as normal. And obviously there's a few more things really to talk about. He was versatile, so we talked about that last week. I'm not really going to go into too much detail, but he's versatile. He can play on the left, he can play on the right, he can play in midfield where he's played in the Championship, and he'd done a solid job. Obviously this game he moved back to left back to make sure that Kelly could play in his more preferred position at right back, and actually done a very solid job. And I've said this already, if you've got a versatile player like Joe Ward and someone like Kelly who doesn't feel that comfortable, Joe Ward will be the man to go in his position, and actually he done a pretty decent job. And I've talked about it already, doing the solid things right. So whether he was playing on the right, on the left, he always puts in a solid shift defensively. And I've said this already, although he may dip in and out of form, he's in my opinion, one of Palace's most sort of, I can't think of the word, but he's one of our most frequent performing players, let's say. So he always puts in a solid performance. But obviously, we talk about players doing things throughout the game. Obviously, Wayne Hennessy making that save against Kante. Joe Ward had a very good moment in the game where he did get booked for it, but it actually did keep us in the game. So we talk about defenders making tactical fouls, as I like to call them. So they're fouls where you stop the player going through on goal when there's no one else there to defend it. And obviously you get booked for it, but then you just get the chance to defend the free kick to clear the danger. And that's what Joe Ward done. Obviously Hazard was going to go run through on goal. Joe Ward obviously made the tackle, did get booked for it, and obviously we got the free kick, or Chelsea got the free kick, which we cleared. So it's just showing that when he was called upon to make that tackle, yes, he took the punishment of a yellow card, but he kept us in the game by obviously not making sure that Hazard could go through on goal. But obviously Joe Ward, I've given him a 7 because once again, a very solid and, a performance from him. A player, once again, who we can rely on, being very constant with his performances. And obviously we talk about how potent Chelsea was. He kept the, the attack of Hazard and Victor Moses quite quiet. And obviously we talk about defenders doing the normal things right. Joe Ward's done this in this game, making blocks, making tackles, and just done nothing spectacular but defended as normal. Obviously moving on now to the captain Scott Dan, who I'm going to give a 6. As with Hennessy, indecision proved costly, and he will watch the replay and think why he didn't jump for Costa's goal. He did make an attempt to block the cross. He otherwise had a reasonable game, going back to basics, making blocks and tackles. Only black mark turned out to be the crucial one in the final income. So obviously Scott Dan here, I've given him a 6 because much like Hennessy, I've talked about it already, the indecision. So the fact that they had that miscommunication and they weren't able to decide whether Hennessy was going to claim the ball, whether Dan was going to jump. So that did prove costly. And obviously we talk about watching the replays. Obviously the players do that after the game, and Scott Dan will probably look back at the replay and see, well, why didn't he jump for the goal? Because you see that he probably could have made an attempt. We know he's a good aerial threat. He probably could have jumped higher than Costa to get the ball out, or at least try to sort of jump to make sure that Costa's header would deflect out for a corner. And then probably look back at the replay and go, well, yes, I should have done that. But if you look back, he didn't even make an attempt to block the cross. So whether that's because Wayne Hennessy had said, I'm going to go forward and claim the ball, or whether that's just because Scott Dan didn't feel comfortable or wasn't aware that the fact that Costa was there. But if you look back at the replay, yes, Hennessy should have come forward and claimed it or stayed in his line to make sure he could get a hand on it. But then similarly, Scott Dan should have been, you know, there jumping higher than Costa to try and block it. And me looking back at the replay personally, I think that Scott Dan, he saw the run from Costa, so he saw that Costa was running in between the defenders, so he got close to him, he marked him, so he was doing that right. But when the ball came into the area, he couldn't quite get high enough, and that's what turned out to be costly. You know, we were fantastic throughout the game, but it was just one error that cost us, the indecision and miscommunication that cost us, which meant we did go on to lose the game. Because other than that sort of one mistake we made, we were very dominant, like I've said already. But other than that, much like the other defenders, significantly better than in other weeks, and actually had quite a reasonable game. And I've talked about this, and I'm going to keep repeating it, because this is what we were missing the last few games, the games against Swansea, these sort of games, and Burnley. We were missing the fact that we didn't go back to basics. The defenders now, whether it's something they've done in the training ground, or whether it's just because they've now just started to do it, they're going back to basics. They're making blocks, they're making tackles, and this is what is crucial for the way we've played. You know, the last few weeks, I've said it, against Swansea particularly, we weren't defending enough, we weren't making these blocks, we weren't making these tackles. But in this game, although we did lose, it was actually a reasonable game from all the defence. And the thing I think that's crucial to that, the way that we've changed the way we defend, is actually the fact we're going back to basics. You know, it's not all about doing fancy defending, it's about, well, if you're under pressure, you clear the ball out, which we've done. It's about making blocks, of stopping Chelsea getting forward, and making tackles, which we've done very well. And I've talked about making tackles. Obviously, Joe Ward made that crucial tackle as well. And I talked about, you know, the error costing us is the only black mark. You know, Scott Dan, as the captain, had a very good game, commanding as usual. But the only mistake he made did prove to be costly. So it just shows that in this league, if you make a mistake, it will punish you. And obviously, in this instance, we did go on to lose the game. But obviously, Scott Dan, the captain, I have given him a 6 because, you know, he did do a pretty solid job defensively, making tackles, making blocks. But obviously his indecision and miscommunication did cost us the goal, because if he had jumped, or if he had told Hennessy to claim the ball, we probably would have conceded and probably got rewarded for a game where we probably did deserve a point. But obviously a good game from the captain. Hopefully in the next few games he can improve that communication with the goalkeeper, and also try and match players and jump to get the ball as well. And obviously we know he can be an aerial threat, so now he's going to try and use his aerial threat to defend as well. Obviously moving on to his defensive partner, Damien Delaney, who I'm going to give a 7. Handled the challenge posed by Costa reasonably well, not responsible for the striker's goal, as he wasn't the one to mark Costa. Much like Dan, he went back to basics in making blocks and tackles. So see, Damien Delaney here, I've given him a 7, because much like most of the defence, he dealt with the challenge posed by Costa very well. So obviously we talk about Costa, he's one of the best strikers in the league at the minute, the informed striker, you know, with about 13 goals I believe it is in the season. So, you know, we had to deal with the threat very well. And obviously, other than the goal Costa did score, he was limited to very few chances. And that's because, you know, Damien Delaney, Scott Dan, they were marking him quite closely, making sure that, you know, we were blocking him, making tackles on him, and we've done that reasonably well. And obviously we talk about the mistake for the goal. You know, Damien Delaney was not at all responsible for the goal, because he wasn't the one marking Costa. So, you know, we could say that actually the fact that we lost the game because of a defensive error was nothing to do with Damien Delaney, because he had a very solid game. And much like Dan, and much like the whole defence, I'm going to keep saying this, but Dan, or Damien Delaney, Dan, they went back to basics. You know, it's not all about doing fancy footwork and football like we've seen from Delaney the last few weeks. Went back to basics, and that's where his experience comes into the game. You know, he makes the blocks, he makes the tackles. So when obviously Costa, the biggest threat for Chelsea, was coming forward, we made blocks on his shots, we made the tackles to stop him getting through. So it just shows how actually we did deal with the threat of Chelsea. But obviously we talk about the goal. If you look back at the replay, and I keep talking about the replay because you do watch them, because you want to see, you know, where it went wrong for Palace, why this mistake happened. And if you look back at it, and they highlighted it on Match of the Day, Dame Delaney was shouting to Scott Dan, or shouting to Hennessy to say, go on and catch the ball. And obviously he was looking at Dan to say, you should just block off the defender so that, you know, Hennessy can get a grab on the ball. But obviously it didn't work out like that, and Hennessy went to claim the ball, missed it. Dan tried to jump and missed it, and we scored. So it's just showing that actually Damien Delaney, using his experience, he told the players what to do, whether it was just because it was a split-second thing, but no one seemed to work well. But obviously Damien Delaney, I've given him a 7 because once again a very solid defensive shift from him, and we've seen a significant improvement in our defence since he's coming back into the side. But obviously he's used his experience very well to deal with the, you know, threat by Costa. He done that reasonably well, and other than the goal we conceded where it was a bit of a defensive mix-up, he done a pretty decent job once again, going back to basics and making the blocks and the tackles. But obviously moving on now to the right back, Martin Kelly, who I am going to give a 7. A good performance against Eden Hazard and one of the best attacking displays for a long time. He got forward really well in the first half and put some decent crosses into the box and provided some threat with overlapping runs down the wing. So obviously Martin Kelly here, I've given him a 7, and he has been the liability in recent weeks. He hasn't really been that solid, you know, playing as a left back, but since he's moved back to his natural position as right back, we've seen the best of him. He's been performing very well, and it was a very good performance against Chelsea. And obviously he was posed against the threat of Eden Hazard. He had to try and keep him quiet, and some people said that, you know, he did keep Eden Hazard in his pocket or his back pocket. I think we could say that to some extent because, you know, he kept his threat to a minimum. He made sure that, you know, Eden Hazard had little opportunities, and considering Eden Hazard at, certainly a few seasons ago was one of the best wingers, let's say, in the world in modern football, I think we could say that Martin Kelly did deal with his threat quite well. And actually we talk about fullbacks being good offensively, you know, and that's the sort of the formation, the tactics we've got at the minute. You know, Martin Kelly was instructed to go forward, and this is actually one of his best attacking displays we've seen in a long time. So yes, he was very good defensively, and he was much better than he's been in past weeks, and that's because he's playing on his natural position. But obviously this game he got forward a lot of the time, especially in the first half. You know, he was running down the flanks, and where he's playing in his much natural position as the right back, he can use his right foot to whip in crosses, and that's what he done. He provided some lovely curling efforts into the box. One of them met by the head of MacArthur and went just wide. So he's actually showing that when he's playing in his natural position, we can see the best of him, and I think that's what we were missing in the last few games. The fact that he was playing out of position meant that we were weaker, significantly weaker, but now he's moved back to his proper position. Yes, we've seen he can now defend better because that's his natural position. He's normally better seeing or defending and marking players cutting in from that side, and obviously we've seen it from an attacking perspective. He's better at getting crosses in, and that's what we've done. You know, we've got the strikers, we've got Benteke, we've got MacArthur, all players that are very good at headering the ball in the area. So Martin Kelly tried to get in as many crosses as he could, and that's what he done. And I said this already, one of them did get met by the head of MacArthur, so just showing how well he played. But obviously he had good awareness as well, the fact that he could get into these spaces, so he wasn't all just running down the flanks and then getting crosses in. He actually linked up with the midfield quite well. You know, Yohan Cabaye had a pretty decent game, found him with a lovely sort of cross-field pass from the middle of the field to Martin Kelly. Lovely control from Kelly, and then the cross was even better. So just showing that yes, he can go forward and attack well as well as defending, but also he can link up well with the rest of the players in the team to make sure he can create opportunities. And obviously we talk about him going forward. You know, he isn't a winger, but he had some quite lovely overlapping runs down the wing. So whether it be Zaha or punching on the wing, he would link up very well with them. Whether it be sort of 1-2 passing to get more space, or whether it be, you know, one person runs forward while the other one holds up the ball while the other guy finds space and then they pass the ball. Anything like that to sort of keep the ball and to have that attacking threat. You know, Martin Kelly done quite well, and that's what we've missed from him. You know, we've seen where he was playing on the left, he wasn't really that effective. Now he's come back onto the right, and he was absolutely fantastic. Defended well, that was good, but the thing about his performance was the fact that, you know, his attacking threat was fantastic. The fact that he could run down the flanks, get the crosses in on his right foot, the fact that he linked up with the wingers, you know, doing 1-2 passes was fantastic. And that's why I've given him 7, because, you know, yes, we talk about defenders, you want them to do the basics, which he done. That's fine, he cleared the basics, he defended well, making tackles, making blocks, but the thing that really was fantastic about his performance was his attacking display. And yes, we weren't fantastic going forward and we didn't create as many opportunities as we would have liked to create, but certainly Martin Kelly was one of the most positive attacking threats throughout the side because he tried to keep going down that wing, and that's primarily, I personally think, because he's now playing in his natural position, he's more comfortable there to obviously create more opportunities. Obviously moving on now to Joe Ledley, who I'm going to give a 7. Tasked with taking on Matic, he made some important tackles and handled the aerial threat well as well. Went unnoticed for the majority of the game, but did his job well to hold the midfield in the anchor role. So obviously, Joe Ledley here, I've given him a 7, because once again, it was a good performance from him. So we've seen Joe Ledley coming back into the side and partnering with MacArthur and Cabaye. Now we all thought that, you know, with Punchin and Townsend and Zaha sort of being the front three players, there'll be quite a lot of competition for the two sort of defensive mid roles in the side. And obviously we all thought that maybe Cabaye may partner with MacArthur because that was quite a good partnership last season, but obviously we've seen that with sort of Townsend getting dropped and Punchin being moved out wide, we've seen actually Joe Ledley coming into the side and actually forming quite a good partnership with both MacArthur and Cabaye, and we saw that in this game, and that's why he did have a pretty decent performance. And obviously he was sort of tasked, his main priority, let's say, in the game, the tactic was to mark Matic, and he'd done that very well. You know, Matic playing a sort of defensive role, obviously he couldn't get forward as much, but when he did get forward, you know, Joe Ledley was the main man to sort of mark him, and he'd done that very well. And we talk about the defenders making tackles, making blocks. Joe Ledley done that, playing that sort of anchor role and almost at times playing as a third centre back. He done very well at making these blocks. So when the players are coming forward, he'd make the tackles to stop them getting forward, and he dealt with the aerial threat as well. So we talked about Scott Dan making that mistake in the air, which was costly for us, meaning we conceded the goal. Joe Ledley, whenever the ball came into the area, he'd make a header to clear the danger, and that's the saying, you know, if in doubt, hoof it out. Well, yes, he'd done that, you know, he cleared the ball on a few occasions, but when there's an aerial threat coming into the box, you don't want the ball sort of playing head tennis, as I like to call it. You don't want the ball sort of bundling around the box. So Joe Ledley used his experience and his aerial threat to, you know, clear the ball away from danger. And we talk about players sort of going unnoticed, you know, they're very quiet throughout the game, and we've seen that with Townsend this season. You know, he's been in and out of games, he hasn't really made an impact. You know, Joe Ledley did go unnoticed, but for the right reason. The fact that he did do his job, you know, the fact that he wasn't very potent, let's say, you know, he wasn't the biggest player there making these or helping our attacking threat and dominating the game, but you know, he was unnoticed because he was doing his job. He was playing the anchor role well, and that's what the thing you want, you know, you want a midfielder giving cover to the defence, and that's what Joe Ledley done in the anchor role. And I've said this already, you know, he was playing so deep at times it was almost like a third centre back, and that sort of cover, that sort of help to the backline actually did help us defensively throughout the game. And obviously he wasn't to blame for the goal, so you could actually say as a whole game, by the goal, take away the goal, he actually had a pretty decent game. So, you know, Joe Ledley, I've given him a 7 because once again, yes, he did go unnoticed for the majority of the game, but that's because he was just doing his simple work. His role was not to go forward and get involved in the game. His job was obviously to keep control and just give protection to the back line in the sort of anchor role, which he done very well. And obviously the main man he was told to mark was Matic. He done that very well, making tackles and obviously dealing with the aerial threat as well. So now to move on to Yohan Cabaye, who I am going to give an 8.
You used to play in black and white, I don't know why. Ooh, then plays in red and blue, Yohan Cabaye. Now after scoring goals for fun, I don't know what happened. Hey, Yohan Cabaye, Yohan Cabaye, Yohan Cabaye. You used to play in black and white, I don't know why. Ooh, now he plays in red and blue.
Palace's best performer had a busy game that was not too dissimilar to Wednesday's efforts against Manchester United. Maybe should have got forward a little bit more to help Benteke, who was star of the service. Had a good shot well saved at the start of the second half, but he was always in the right positions for a pass. The midfield was weakened by his substitution. So obviously Yohan Cabaye here, I've given him an 8 because as you can probably hear by the summary, he was probably Palace's best performer, and we've seen that in the game against Manchester United on Wednesday night, that actually Yohan Cabaye, he's coming back to his old self again, you know, being dominant in the midfield. And actually both of these games he was highly rated as, you know, the man of the match. He was probably Palace's best player in both of these games, and you know, in this game, yes, he was good as a whole in the game. Maybe he should have tried to get forward a little bit more. And obviously, we talk about the midfielders supplying the attackers. You know, in past weeks, we've been fine with doing that. You know, we've been scoring goals, finding Benteke in the area. He's scored goals. But in this game, we didn't really create as many opportunities for Benteke. And he was actually star of the service. And I'll go on to talk about what that meant for Benteke and his performance. But obviously Yohan Cabaye, he was so good in the game, he was prominent without the game, and it's probably, you know, he was probably Palace's best player in sort of the last 2 or 3 games. But if he had got forward a little bit more and tried to be, you know, use his passing ability for the better, maybe he would have had a better game. But we talk about him, you know, not being as good as an attacking threat in this game. But, you know, there was a point in the second half where he had a shot from just at the beginning of the second half, just from outside the area. The rebound, or the shot, came into the air, rebounded off Courtois, I believe it was, and then obviously Yohan Cabaye hit this shot on the volley. And we don't know, you look back at the replay, it might have snuck in at the bottom post, but obviously Courtois had to make the save. So just showing that actually he's still got a lethal foot on him. And it was actually a very good shot, and it was actually an even better save. So it just shows that, you know, he has got the attacking threat, but in this game he didn't really have it as much as he used to do. But obviously I've talked about already his passing ability was fantastic. You know, in the first half we talk about how good Kelly was overlapping on the wing, but Yohan Cabaye, with his passing, he actually found Kelly from the centre of the park, passed the ball to Kelly, lovely weighted ball for Kelly on the wing, to Kelly to obviously to whip the ball in. So actually he's just showing that yes, he couldn't supply Benteke and wasn't as much as an attacking threat as he usually is, but when he had the opportunity, when there was space and he had the chance to think about it, he was able to find lovely passes. And obviously yes, he found that pass to Kelly, which was fantastic, but he was also in the right positions for a pass. So there's a few passes coming to him throughout the game, and actually he was, you know, managed to get on them. And we talk about players making an impact off the bench. There's actually sort of a reverse thing here. You know, when Cabaye got taken off, probably for, you know, fitness reasons and the fact that he might have picked up a little injury from a little knock, which isn't very serious, but you know, you don't want a player to be walking with a knock and make it worse. But it was significantly weakened by substitution. So we talk about players coming on to make an impact. Well, Yohan Cabaye made the impact in the game, and when he was taken off, that sort of impact, you know, wore off, let's say, and it was actually weakened. So we did lose quite a lot of our dominance we had in the second period, because in the second half we were very dominant against Chelsea, but as soon as Cabaye went off, we sort of lost that. And whether that be because we lost the composure, we weren't as dominant on possession or off possession, you know, anything like that, it's probably why, you know, we lost that sort of impact on the game. And probably because he was Palace's best attacking player, that's probably why the reason he probably made such an impact on the game is because he was Palace's best player. He was good offensively and defensively. But obviously we talk about his passing. You know, he uses his passing very well to find other players and supply them, but also set play deliveries were fantastic. You know, we had a few set pieces, corners, free kicks where he delivered the ball in, lovely curling efforts, and obviously we weren't able to get our head on them. So actually showing that yes, he's good at passing as well, but from a dead ball situation in a set piece, whether it be a corner or a free kick, he can deliver, you know, some lovely balls. And actually that was highlighted not just by myself, but on Match of the Day they did highlight the fact that his passing was fantastic, and not so much about his set pieces but the passing as well. And the actual clip that they highlighted and analysed was actually the clip where he found Kelly on the right. The fact that he was in the centre of the park, you know, could have gone forward and tried to find Benteke, but he saw that Kelly was on space, so put that lovely ball, lovely weight on it, lovely height to find Kelly. And that's what I highlighted on Match of the Day, and that's what he brings to the side. People may say that he doesn't quite fit into our sort of counter-attacking system, but actually in this game we saw that how crucial he can be to the way we play, the fact that his passing is sublime. And we talk about him not having as much attacking presence, an impact what we would expect him to have, but in this game he done a pretty good defensive job. You know, he was doing all the nitty gritty works and making these tackles, making blocks, you know, trying to get the ball off players, mark players, and he done that very well. And yes, you know, against Man United he may be at fault because he slipped when Pogba sort of out-muscled him, but actually, you know, in this game it weren't too bad of him actually. And you know, he wasn't that good offensively, but when he had to go forward and find a pass or, you know, get a cross in, he done that very well. But certainly the reason I've given him late is because he was Palace's best performer. You know, it's not the first game in a few games where he's been dominant throughout the game. And although he could, if he had got forward a little bit more and tried to supply Benteke, maybe he could have had an even better game. But the thing, crucially, what was crucial to the way we played and what made his performance so good and outstanding was the fact that his passing was fantastic. But an 8 for him, just for this passing out on its own, a very good game from him, and hopefully you know, moulding into the new system that Palace have got. Hopefully he can mould into it more and be more of an ever-growing attacking presence. Obviously moving on to his fellow attacking midfield partner, and that is James McArthur, who I'm going to give a 7. Playing in a more advanced role, McArthur worked tirelessly, but it was ineffective when it came to breaking Chelsea down. Had a header go wide in the first half, but no other real chances. Against an attacking side, he had to stay disciplined and choose when to go forward, and he'd done that very well. So obviously, James McArthur here, I've given him a 7, and much like Cabaye, he's been one of the most sort of, he's been one of the best players, let's say, throughout the last few weeks. He's been consistent, let's say, with his performances. And obviously, we've seen last season that he was playing a more defensive role. But now we're seeing a different side to his game. And that is with him playing a more advanced role. Not necessarily as a cam, but sort of more as an attacking centre mid, let's say. And we talk about his work rate being fantastic. And the fact that his stamina is fantastic. He keeps going on to the end. And actually, he worked tirelessly throughout the game. You know, he kept running at players, tried to run to make space, tried to find passes, you know, and although he did put all of that work in, was tireless with that, you know, it was very ineffective. And that's not because we had nothing or no end product, it's just because of the fact that Chelsea was so good defensively. And we talk about him working tirelessly, trying to create chances. He had a chance of his own. Obviously, once again, Kelly and Cabaye linking up well. The cross from Kelly came in from the right. Obviously, McArthur managed to get the better of both of the defenders. And bearing in mind, he isn't the tallest player. And he got the head in it, and it went just wide in the first half. So he did have a chance throughout the game. But as the game as a whole, he didn't really have any other chances. And obviously we talked about Chelsea being so good, you know, they're such a good attacking side that you've got to be careful. You don't want to put all your efforts in trying to attack Chelsea and then, you know, try and score goals, when actually if you do that you might leave spaces and Chelsea may punish you. So obviously against the attacking Chelsea side, as him being one of the more older players on the field, he had to be more disciplined, and actually he done that. So, you know, when you're disciplined, when you're in a team, you've got to decide, you know, when you've got an attacking threat and a defensive solidarity, let's say, with Chelsea, you've got to decide when to go forward and when to stay back. And actually I think that sort of decision that McArthur made in that midfield, and the midfield as a whole, you know, Yohan Cabaye included, so that sort of decision to decide when to go forward and attack, and when to decide to stay back and defend, and to make sure that Chelsea couldn't get through, I think that sort of helped Palace have a dominance on the game. Because, you know, if you go forward too much and put too much effort to try and break down their defence, you leave gaps and spaces in your own defence, and then Chelsea can go forward. So that sort of control in the midfield meant that, you know, James McArthur had a pretty good game, and actually, you know, he done that very well. You know, yes, he was playing sort of more forward and he didn't really have that much impact going forward, but certainly he done well with his job. But, you know, I've given him a 7 because, once again, with him playing in that sort of more advanced attacking role, he's working really well in that role. You know, he's working tirelessly, trying to press players down, trying to find passes, trying to, you know, have shots and goal, and he done that in the game. You know, a few shots, a header that went wide, so he did have opportunities to score, but obviously none of them resulted in a goal. And considering he scored against Man United, there was a bit of pressure on him, let's say, to have such a good performance again. And actually, other than the fact he didn't create that many opportunities, it was actually a pretty decent performance from McArthur. And obviously a 7 for him. Once again, a tireless, very good attacking performance from him. Obviously moving on now to the winger Jason Puncheon, who I'm going to give a 6. No real impact on the game this time, as he struggled to challenge the visitors' defence, with the more expected of him in terms of creating chances for Christian Benteke. Played out wide, but there were no crosses into the box. But when he had the ball, he was calm, but went off in the second half. So obviously, Jason Puncheon here, I've given him a 6, and it wasn't the best performance from Puncheon, and he didn't really have that much of an impact on the game. But in saying that, you know, it was a very hard team to play against. You know, Chelsea were, you know, very, very solid defence. So he did struggle to challenge them, and that's probably just because, not because Puncheon was bad necessarily, it's just because Chelsea were better. I mean, we did expect more from him, you know. We know how talented he is down the middle, but in this game, much like Joe Ward, he's versatile, he can move positions. He was moved out wide for this position, you know, to make sure that someone like Cabaye could come in instead of Townsend and sort of change the team around. And, you know, although he did try and create chances, tried to get forward, with him playing on the wing, that isn't his natural position, and so he did struggle. And the one thing really to talk about is we didn't really create that many opportunities going forward, and the main reason for that is our two wingers, Puncheon and Zaha, didn't get enough crosses in to Benteke. So Benteke did struggle throughout the game, and much like Puncheon, he didn't really have that much of a bad game, Benteke, because, you know, Chelsea were a lot better, and we weren't necessarily bad, but Chelsea were a lot better. But, you know, because we couldn't get crosses in from the likes of Puncheon and Zaha, it meant that Benteke obviously suffered because these two wingers weren't really creating any chances. And obviously that's the thing, the reason that Puncheon didn't really create chances, didn't really get crosses into the box, was just because he was playing out wide. And although he can play out wide and he's quite effective, you know, he's got the speed, he still can, you know, hit them on his right or left foot, you know, he isn't that effective as he would be down the middle. But, you know, when he had the ball, so when he sort of cut inside and had the ball in the middle, you know, he was quite calm with it. You know, he took a calmness throughout the game, and he was quite disciplined with the ball, I suppose you could say. You know, the fact that when players get possession, they sometimes try to offload it because they don't want the pressure of it. But obviously Jason Puncheon, with his experience from playing sort of down the middle in that role, when he had the ball, he would try and link up with other players, obviously trying to do overlapping runs with the fullbacks, or whether it be him playing down the middle, he'd try and link up with the other players. So actually, you know, from an attacking perspective, he done alright. You know, when he had the ball, he was looking to supply other players for the attack. But, you know, from sort of his main attacking aspect, you know, playing on the wing, you would expect him to get crosses into the area, which he obviously didn't do, and that meant that Christian Benteke did suffer. So obviously Jason Puncheon, I've given him a 6 because he didn't really have that much impact on the game, obviously where he was playing out of position on the right, on the left hand side, and because, you know, he was playing against a very decent, solid Chelsea team, and we would have expected more from him. You know, we would have expected more crosses into the area from Benteke, but you can understand with him playing sort of out of position, he couldn't really, you know, have that much opportunity to do that. And obviously he went off second half, not because he played bad, it's just because we wanted to sort of change things up and try and play maybe a winger out wide to make more impact on the game. But you know necessarily, you know, he didn't really have the best of performances, but certainly playing out of position, done what he could. Obviously moving on now to the superstar from the last few weeks, Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give a 6. It hasn't been an easy week for Zaha. Played in a more advanced role on Wednesday, he was marked out of the game against Chelsea, often surrounded by 3 players when he got the ball. Although not as bright as previous games, he still looked an attack down both flanks. No real chances or too many crosses to remember, but it was a satisfactory performance. So obviously Wilfried Zaha here, this is a sort of debatable one, because he's been, you know, the last few games against Hull, he was fantastic. I commented on him saying he was almost world class, unplayable in these games. But, you know, a lot of pressure was put on him in them games, you know, coming back to play his former club, going to play Chelsea. You know, we would have expected him to, you know, to carry on that form. But, you know, it was pretty difficult for him to do that. And although he wasn't bright, you know, he wasn't as good as he was in previous games, he still looked good down the flanks. But just to talk about, you know, the last few games and why he hasn't been sort of up to the standard. Obviously, we played against Chelsea, Man United, so 2 pretty solid defensive teams. So you can understand why it wouldn't be easy for an attacker. The fact that you've got pretty quality defenders there trying to stop you. But obviously, where he's playing in more advanced roles, instead of playing sort of on the wing and trying to get crosses in, his sort of objective, a tactic was for him to play down the middle, sort of as a striker or maybe as a centre forward, and play off the striker, which, you know, we know he's good, he's got the pace, he's got the skill, so he should be playing out wide. So that's one of the reasons why he struggled and he wasn't as good as, say, he was against Hull. The fact that he was playing sort of up front, maybe as a centre forward rather than the winger, and that meant that he didn't really have any opportunities to score. But also, you know, when he did eventually sort of move out wide to try and get crosses in, yes, he still got a few more crosses into the area, which he would have then, you know, what he would have got when he was playing down the middle. But, you know, he's a very good attacking threat, and Chelsea knew that. So they marked him with about 3, maybe 2 or 3 players. So when you've got 2 or 3 players surrounding you, there's not really that many opportunities for you to sort of get crosses in. So that sort of pressure from being surrounded by players and put under the pressure, he didn't really have the opportunity to score goals. And that moves me on to it, you know, yes, he wasn't as bright as he's been in other games, but he still looked a threat down the side. So when, say, Chelsea weren't marking him with 3 players, he still had, you know, he had the chance to run down the flank, and he used that very well. He used his pace, he used his skill to get past players and get the crosses in, and that's what he done, you know, linking up with Kelly on a few occasions down the flanks, you know, trying to create opportunities. And we know he's renowned, especially this season, for his crosses and chances really created. There weren't really any chances or crosses to remember, you know, and that's purely because he was playing out of position. And when he did play outside in his proper position on the wing, on the flank, you know, he was man marked by a lot of the Chelsea defenders. But considering he was under that pressure, you know, being defended quite tightly, it's still a satisfactory performance. He done what was expected of him, considering he was playing out of position and considering, you know, he was put under pressure. But certainly Wilfried Zaha, we've seen what he can do this season, so now he's just got to try and be more consistent, carry this on. And although it's been 2 difficult games against Man United, against Chelsea, you know, he still came out of it pretty good. But in this game, you know, it would have been more effective for Pardew to play him out wide so he could run at the players who the Chelsea defence are not that fast, so he could run at them, try and get chances. And although he didn't create many, you know, he didn't create any crosses in this game, if he had played out wide more and had more support, say from Kelly, he probably could have been able to get more crosses in. But certainly a 6 for him, a satisfactory performance. Obviously moving on now to the final player, Christian Benteke, who I'm going to give a 5. The service wasn't great, but Benteke needs to up his work rate in games like this. He looked isolated for the majority up against Luiz and Cahill. He had a few opportunities when he chested down the ball, turned the defender and had a shot on goal, but these were easily saved by Courtois. So obviously Christian Benteke here, I've given him a 5, and sort of as I've discussed all of the players, I've sort of discussed, you know, why or the attackers haven't really created opportunities, and obviously I've waited to tell you this, but Benteke was the man who suffered. So obviously Chelsea, we know they're a pretty good team, and they did sort of isolate us at times, and that meant that we couldn't get the balls and we couldn't get service to Benteke. And Benteke, you know, he did suffer because we know how good he can be from headers. You know, crosses coming in, he can head them. We know how good he can be if you supply him from the middle. He can sort of run past the defender and have a shot. So we've seen what he can do. But this game, and I've said this already, you know, Chelsea were, you know, too good for him, and that meant that he was a bit isolated for a majority of the game. And that's because Luiz and Cahill, very solid defenders this season, and that meant that they kept him isolated. And considering they play with a 3 at the back formation, that means that there's 3 defenders or the 3 centre backs against 1 striker. So when you're trying to get balls in, they're going to be easily defended. So, you know, that's why Christian Benteke did suffer. The fact that we couldn't get crosses in meant that he wasn't at his best. And some people may say that he needs to work or up his work rate in games like this. So when the team can't get crosses into him, maybe he should try and get involved more in the play and sort of try and receive the ball down the middle and create a chance like that rather than waiting for the ball to be crossed in. So you could say that yes, he should have upped his work rate and tried to adapt his style of play, but certainly we did try and sort of stick to what we normally do, and it worked for the majority. But, you know, like I said already, because we were quite isolated, yes, Benteke was isolated so he couldn't get on the headers, but also, you know, our players, especially Zaha and Puncheon, were isolated, which meant they couldn't get crosses in. Now, obviously, we talk about him. I've given him a 5 because it was a pretty bad performance from him. Well, I say bad, it was just a weak performance, let's say. You know, he didn't have any opportunities to score, but that's because, you know, the other players weren't supplying them. And if he had better supply, he probably would have had a bigger impact on the game. And that's the thing with him, you know. Yes, you may think he had no influence in the game because he didn't have, or he didn't create any goal scoring opportunities, but that's purely because he didn't get any supply from other players. But obviously there was a few things he done in the second half which were pretty good. You know, we talk about him being isolated. There was a few times where he chested the ball down in his chest, so when we did get a ball in from the flank, he chested it down on his chest, turned the defender and had a shot on goal. Pretty good movement there, but obviously they were easily saved. So one of them, Courtois, got down low to save. Another one, just an easy catch for him. So yes, he didn't have that many opportunities, you know, because he didn't get supplied, but when he got supplied of sort of the drag, sort of sloppy balls, let's say, he managed to control it down, take sort of control of the situation, turn the defender and have the shot on goal. So to be honest, he done well in that instance. You know, he tried to create an opportunity from nothing, you know, so, you know, a little scrap of the ball, he tried to make something from it. But, you know, we expect more from him, and I said this already and I can't highlight it enough. You know, it wasn't a bad performance from him because he done what he had to do, like when he turned the defender. You know, when he saw the ball coming to him, he took control of that opportunity and took it. But, you know, he needs to up his work rate because we need to adapt our style when we can't get crosses into him. Now, obviously, just a few more things, you know, no aerial threat. So I've talked about in the last few weeks, he's been good defensively, you know, clearing the ball away, and obviously an aerial threat in front of the goal. He didn't really use his aerial threat that well throughout the game. You know, he didn't have any clear opportunities from set pieces or when defending, so his aerial threat was sort of neglected throughout this game. And obviously, the final thing really, and I've said this already, you may think he had a really bad game, but the only reason he had a bad game is because the midfield didn't get the ball to him and supply him. You know, the midfield had a pretty good game. You know, they dominated possession, they matched Chelsea for intensity, that was fine. But then the final thing really, they had to try and supply the attackers, and that's what they didn't do. So although you could say I've given him Benteke the 5 because he had a bad game, didn't have that much influence, but really the main reason why I've given it to him is because it was sort of an under par performance, and it's not his fault. You know, the style we play, we want to try and get balls to him which you can use and control, but obviously this game we didn't get enough balls to him. But hopefully in the next few games we can go back to our old ways, not be too isolated, the attacker won't be isolated and the winger won't be isolated, so that sort of combination of getting crosses in and headers can come back. But certainly a 5 for him, not necessarily his fault, but certainly we expect more from in the next few games. Obviously, like I said at the beginning in introduction, if you do want to comment below your player rankings, then of course do that below the video so we can compare mine to yours. And if you want, do comment with who you thought the best player was and whether you thought it was Benteke's fault that, you know, he didn't have that much influence on the game. Obviously, moving on now to these substitutions, Andros Townsend, Fraser Campbell and Zeki Fries. So obviously I'm not going to give any of them ratings because they weren't really on the pitch for long enough. You know, they were left very little time to make an influence from the game. But just to run through what they did, you know, Andros Townsend barely made an impact, and so he was brought off for Puncheon with a chance of sort of a view to change the game. So obviously I talked about Puncheon being quite poor out wide because he was sort of isolated. So you bring on a winger in Andros Townsend, try to change the game with his pace, you know, with his skill on the wing, his ability to get across in, but he didn't really, you know, have that much impact on the game. You know, he avoided tackles, so not doing his defensive work, and with, you know, a few minutes remaining, his moment was set. So he had a free kick, so 25 yards out, quite a central position, so you would either expect him to, you know, to pass it out wide for a player to get across in, or for him to just chip it over the wall for someone else to header it in, or you expect him to have a shot. He decided to have a shot, but you've got to at least try and get it on target when there's a minute to go, and that free kick could change the game. You know, it was really bad free kick. You know, we don't even know where it ended up, and there's been a few jokes on social media saying the ball has landed on the moon, but to be honest, it was probably like that. You know, he sent the ball out the ground into the he hit it sort of almost out the ground into the upper Homestell Road stand. It was a very poor taken free kick and just sums up his influence he had on the game. You know, and the word to describe it, ballooned. I think it was a balloon free kick. It just floated out the ground and just summed up his decline in form since he arrived. So, you know, he came on to make an impact, which you would have expected him to do, but he avoided tackles, and when he had the opportunity to try and score, he absolutely spoiled it. You know, people have highlighted on social media that actually, if you look at the replay, Zaha was out wide on the left with space. He should have just passed it to him for him to get across in, and that sort of would have confused Chelsea, let's say, so they would have to reorganise again, by which time Zaha would have put a cross in and we could have attacked it like that. But certainly a very bad impact from him, and it just shows how his form's declined. You know, he was pretty good when he first joined us, but now he's progressively getting worse. But hopefully in the next few games he can improve, and hopefully him being dropped to the bench will make him see, you know, that he's not good enough and help him to improve. But certainly when you're brought off the bench to make an impact, you've got to try and do that. And when you have an opportunity to take a free kick from 25 yards out, which you know you can probably score, you've got to try and take it better. Obviously, Fraser Campbell came on. He didn't really have that much influence on the game, and we don't even think he had a touch of the ball. So, a pretty useless substitution there. And then Zeki Fries, he was brought on with 5 minutes to go, much like the other players. Not really enough time to make an influence. And the reason I personally think he was brought on was just to sort of, for him to get some more minutes and more experience and just more sort of attacking emphasis down the right. So instead of him being brought on as a left back, he was brought on to be sort of a left winger, let's say, partnering with Townsend. Didn't really have much influence on the game. You know, we thought he would come on to be more attacking emphasis, so use his left foot to get crosses in from the left, and he didn't really do that very well. And to be honest, I must highlight with all the sort of substitutes, he didn't really have that much time to do it. But certainly the one thing that we've highlighted in the last few weeks, and I think I might have mentioned it in last week's podcast, that actually when James MacArthur was taken off in the last few games, we conceded goals. Obviously MacArthur stayed on for the whole of this game, and for the time he scored on the pitch, you know, obviously we conceded a goal, but actually we didn't concede a goal from, you know, him going off the pitch. So it just shows how crucial MacArthur is, not because of his influence on the game, but the fact that whenever he was taken off, we conceded a goal. But this game, where you kept him on the pitch, we obviously didn't concede a goal. But obviously do comment below with what you think about the substitutions, whether you thought they had an impact, and if you want, do you sort of give them ratings from 1 to 10 on how much influence you think they had. But obviously, just to sort of finish off, just a summary of the whole game as a whole, and I've done this the last few weeks, just giving each of the positions on the pitch a rating. I'm going to give the defence a 7. You know, defensively we were sound, and we dealt with Chelsea's attacking threat pretty well, and we only conceded a goal because of one, you know, error of judgment. You know, the miscommunication between Hennessy and Dan. You know, Hennessy should have either stayed in his line or gone to claim the ball and catch it. Dan maybe should have, you know, although he was marking his man, should have jumped to deflect the shot away. But other than that sort of mistake, which did cost us, is actually we were pretty defensively solid. You know, whether it be heading the ball away, whether it be, if in doubt, hoof it out, clearing the ball away. You know, everything defensively was fantastic. Obviously, the midfield, I am going to give it an 8. And although they didn't supply, you know, Benteke and the attackers as a whole, it was a pretty disciplined performance. They matched Chelsea for intensity, so obviously the midfield is where sort of the main thing happens in the game and where the possession is earned. And actually Palace finished the game with, I think, 2% more possession than Chelsea. So it just shows how we had a control of the game, and that obviously resulted in us having more possession. And we supported the back line very well. So obviously the likes of Ledley were playing more defensive, and they gave lots of cover and pretty good in doing that to the back line. But like I said already, you know, although I've given them an 8 because of how influential they were in the game, maybe the midfield could have been even better by trying to attack or trying to supply the attackers even more. And that just moves me on to the attack. The weakest part of Palace's game against Chelsea. We didn't really create that many chances. That's why I've given them a 6. But you can understand why we didn't create chances. It's because we were closely marked by Chelsea defenders who have been fantastic this season, and that meant we were only limited to a few chances which we did take, and they were either saved by Courtois or went just wide. So, you know, you can understand why the attack had that bad game, because they were really, you know, limited to a few chances from Chelsea defenders. But you can't really blame them as much as, say, other teams would blame their attackers for not scoring, because really our system is to get crosses in and supply the attackers, whereas in this game, you know, the midfield didn't supply the attackers, and that's really why they had a bad game. You know, you can't blame them too much on the fact that they had a bad game, because, you know, it wasn't necessarily their fault, because the style we play is to get balls into them. But certainly, you know, this is a performance where you can't really have no shame in it. You know, all of the players put in their utmost efforts, and that's why you can see, you know, all of the players were sort of disciplined with the way they played. They put in their effort. They had very good, they were very good at matching Chelsea for intensity. So, you know, it was a pretty good game, and there's no shame in this. You know, we can't go and sort of cry about it and say we lost to them, because actually the runaway league leaders, we knew it was going to be a challenge, and actually, other than the mistake we made, it was a pretty decent game. And talk about our defence being good, significantly better than in past weeks. You know, maybe this Southampton game was the turning point. Even though we haven't won a game since, maybe that was the turning point in improving our defence. And, you know, the games against Swansea, against Burnley, our defence was lackadaisical, let's say, at times. But, you know, in the last few weeks, our defence was solid. And, you know, it was only one mistake that cost us. So you can say we're improving defensively, and hopefully we can keep up that solidity in the games coming up. Obviously, we did challenge Chelsea and match them for much of the game. And, you know, we dominated the second half. So obviously Chelsea, they dominated the first half, and obviously that meant that they took the lead. But we came out in the second half and were unlucky not to get something from the game, because we dominated so well. So it just shows that although there's no shame in this performance, because we matched Chelsea and we challenged them and tried to sort of press them back, which is good. And, you know, the final thing really is why we lost the game is, you know, yes, we were fantastic, but once again, we fell behind after a defensive miscommunication and a mistake. And, you know, after that, obviously, we were fantastic going forward. You know, we were creating opportunities, but we found it incredibly difficult to break Chelsea down. So in a game like this, where you can't break the opposition down, you should have tried just to sit back on the result and maybe get a draw. But because we made the mistake, we made it harder for ourselves to get back into the game, because it was pretty hard to break Chelsea down. So now for my man of the match war, but before I do that, I give you my man of the match and who I thought had the biggest influence in the game. I'm now going to give you the results of my Twitter poll. So obviously if you do want to vote in next week's Twitter poll and have your opinion heard on who you thought was the biggest influence in the game and the best player from the game, then of course you can vote in next week's Twitter poll. So obviously the poll isn't run by Crystal Palace, it's actually run by my own personal Twitter account, which you can find at the CPC podcast. So do obviously give me a follow so you can vote in next week's Twitter poll, but also do give me a follow, because like Crystal Palace, I do regularly update you with the latest news. So if you do want to keep up to date with all things Palace and have another account to view the news on, then of course you can follow my account. And another thing really, I do follow quite a lot of Palace fans, so after the game I do retweet quite a lot of fan opinions. So if you do want to hear what other fans had to say about the game and have a discussion with them whether you agree with what they said, then of course you can follow me as well, because that's something I do other than other fans or other fan Twitter accounts do. I do retweet other fan opinions so we can have an idea of what everyone thought about the game. But obviously this week, a pretty decent performance against Chelsea, and much like the other weeks, there's a few players that may have missed out. Notably this week it was actually Joe Ledley, but you know, last few weeks there's been performances where it's been hard to name people. You know, a few weeks ago it was very hard to narrow it down to 4 people, but this week there's a pretty decent performance from Palace. You know, we can't be put down by the fact that we lost to the league leaders. So, you know, I managed to get it down to 4 nominations. Obviously they are Wayne Hennessy, Martin Kelly, James McArthur and Yohan Cabaye. So a pretty balance, let's say, from all nominations. So obviously you've got a goalkeeper, you've got a defender, you've got a defensive and attacking mid. So the two, Yohan Cabaye and James McArthur, switching between the midfield roles. So I might as well give you the results of the Twitter poll. Obviously in last place with 12% of the votes was Martin Kelly. Closely followed in third place with 19% of the votes was Wayne Hennessy, which means in second place with 33% of the votes and runner-up in this week's Man of Match poll was Yohan Cabaye, which means in first place with quite a close 36% of the votes is James McArthur. So congratulations, James. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was a very solid attacking performance from you, and obviously you are the winner of this week's Twitter poll. But obviously all of these players had pretty decent performances, and as you can see in this Twitter poll compared to one in a few weeks ago, it was quite a broad range of people or of nominations what people thought should deserve the Man of the Match award. You know, a few weeks ago, Zaha 92% of the votes, whereas this week it's quite balanced. We've got a 33%, we've got 36, 12 and 19. So actually, you know, it just shows that actually people thought that the whole team generally as a whole had a pretty good game. But just to go through why I've given each of the players or put them on for nomination, obviously Wayne Hennessy, full stop, kept Palace in the game by making crucial saves, you know, especially the one against Kante where there was lovely movement from Chelsea inside the box. He got down low, obviously, to make the save. So for that alone, for the fact that he made the crucial save at that point, and the fact that he was just superb throughout the whole game, making these crucial saves, is why I've put him on there. Obviously Martin Kelly, you know, he's moved to right back now, and now he's completely changed as a player, you know, playing in his more natural position. He was defensively solid, and we talk about our fullbacks, you know, trying to be an attacking threat. He was exactly that. He was brilliant at attacking down the right hand side, using his right foot, you know, to get crosses into the area, which one of them was headed just wide, and obviously linking up with the wingers quite well, having overlapping runs, which the other fullback Joe Ward didn't really do. Obviously James McArthur, the reason I've put him on here, and the reason he's in contention most weeks, is because he's a workhorse. He works tirelessly, you know, on and off the ball, you know, making runs to try and make space, making tackles, you know, to get the ball back. And obviously in this game we talk about him playing in more advanced attacking role. You know, he had a header that just went wide of the post from a Martin Kelly cross, incidentally, in the first half. So just showing once again that, you know, he keeps pressing players down, working tirelessly on the ball to try and get stuff for the team, making runs, making tackles, but also he was an attacking threat as well, which was the cross from Kelly was probably better than the header. So another reason why Kelly's on there for that cross in particular. And obviously Yohan Cabaye as well came second in the Twitter poll. The reason I put him on there, and there's a few reasons really, his passing, his set play deliveries were superb, you know, lovely weighted balls into the area. And the thing really that's surprised me, considering the quality we've got on this side, you know, when he was taken off, you could see that the midfield was significantly weakened by his substitution. So when he went off, you saw that the influence he had on the game sort of went, and we lost sort of the key, sort of I wouldn't say world class, but the class passing he had throughout the game. And, you know, we talk about him being good at passing. He was always in the right positions for a pass, so positionally aware of where the ball was coming in or where he had to be to get on the end of the ball. And obviously, much like McArthur, he had a chance on goal, you know, just at the beginning of the second half, you know, had a very good shot, you know, deflected sort of outside the box. He got the ball, hit it on the volley, very good save by Courtois. So just showing that, yes, he can do pass, he can make passes, he can make runs, but also he can put a pretty powerful shot. And obviously this one went just wide. But obviously it's pretty hard really to pick a man of match for this game, because although we did lose the game, and you may think it's a pretty bad performance, most of the team put in very decent performances and actually matched Chelsea for intensity and things like that. And obviously mentions go to Joe Ledley, who, playing that anchor role in the team, had a very good influence in the game, you know, protecting the back four. But, you know, he missed out because obviously these players, his performance wasn't that much better, but the influence that these four players had was fantastic. But just to go over again, Wayne Hennessy for the saves he made to keep Palace in the game, Kelly for his, you know, how solid he was at the back. Let's try and not confuse myself by trying to pronounce the word. But yeah, he was solid at the back, and obviously attacking threat with his right foot. James McArthur, as usual, working tirelessly on and off the ball, making runs and tackles. And Yohan Cabaye, just for his class, really, you know, his passing and set play deliveries. But for me personally, there's two players that stood out for me, and they were first and second in the Twitter poll, and that's obviously James McArthur and Yohan Cabaye. And the reason is yes, Martin Kelly and Hennessy, you know, they were crucial. They kept Palace in the game, and they were pretty good attacking threats. But these guys had a pretty big influence on the game. And obviously, James McArthur, unlike most of the other players, he kept going. His stamina was fantastic throughout the game. You know, he was the one constantly making tackles, making runs. He didn't stop. And obviously, he had one of our only chances in the first half to score. Similar to Yohan Cabaye, fantastic influence on the game, making passes, putting set piece deliveries, which were good as well. And obviously we saw that his influence was so good that when he went off, we could see how weak the team was. And it's pretty hard to pick a winner for this week's one. And I'm actually, for the first time in quite a long time, I'm actually going to go against the Twitter poll. So obviously, James MacArthur won the Twitter poll, but I'm actually going to give it to Yohan Cabaye. So congratulations, Yohan. You do win my personal man of match for the game against Chelsea. And that's just because, yes, MacArthur has worked tirelessly throughout the game. But Yohan Cabaye, his passes were absolutely class. The fact that he would link up with other players, his set pieces, corners, set piece, yes, the set pieces in general, whether it be corners, free kicks, they were all fantastic. And, the fact that he had a shot as well. So MacArthur had a shot, or had a header that just went wide, whereas Cabaye's shot, his chance, actually had to get saved by the keeper. So slightly better than MacArthur's chance. And the main thing really for me is, yes, MacArthur stayed on for the whole game, and obviously he had very good stamina. But when Cabaye went off, you just saw how crucial he was, and that's why he's won my man of match, because how crucial he was. Because when he went off, you could see, how bad the team, or how weaker the team were when he went off. But certainly, all of these players, especially Joe Ledley as well, special mentions to him. But these 4 players in particular, pretty decent, solid performances from them, and for the whole team as a general. So even though we lost the game, we done pretty well. But certainly, these players in particular, MacArthur and Yohan Cabaye, both winners of my own personal man of match and the Twitter poll man of match. Certainly good performances from them. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got an exclusive interview with Alan Pardew and Wayne Hennessy following the game.
In a defeat today, but the team played well, didn't they?
I thought we played really well. Like saying they're one of the best in the league right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go on and win it. But like saying, I was very impressed with the boys, how we dealt with stuff, and we're unlucky today not to come away with a point or maybe 3.
And defensively as well, it looks like the team's improved in the past week.
Yeah, definitely. Like saying, games have been coming quick and fast, so boys haven't had much time to recover. And like saying, I thought they played really well today. It was just unlucky we didn't get anything.
And the goal of theirs, did you say, just a good header?
Yeah, very good header. Like saying, we're a bit misjointed at the back there, and like saying, they punished really well. And like saying, you only have to give them a little sniff and they'll take you. And Diego's on fire right now, and he did.
You must be pleased with your own performance in the past 2 games, especially.
Yeah. It's just a shame I couldn't get anything out of the performances. But like saying, is every keeper wants to make saves, but at the end of the day, you want to try and keep clean sheets, and unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that.
What's the feeling like in the team at the moment?
Really good. Like saying, the spirit's really good. It's just saying, games have been coming quick and fast, and like saying, we had Jason Puncheon back today, which was really good from suspension, and like saying, now hopefully we can start recover, have a good little period, and crack on for Watford and get 3 points on that.
The defeat today, but is it fair to say the team played well against the league leaders?
Of course, our commitment is not getting the reward, but sometimes when you come up against the best teams, you can put everything in and still not get anything. And that's what happened today. They didn't really make a mistake, Chelsea. They made it very, very difficult to find a route through them. Set plays, they defended very well. So it was difficult. They probably put in a better performance defensively than they did offensively. But we passed the ball well. You can see our confidence is not lacking. We just got to do the complete job when we come up against teams in and around us. That's where we've slipped up this year. It's not today's game. We need to start picking up points, and we got some games coming up where we can do that, and we got to deliver.
Fans are giving a lot of plaudits to Yohan Cabaye this week. Do you think we're starting to see the better of him over the past couple of games?
Well, I think Yo's been terrific all year, really, to be honest. He's had a couple of little knocks and come back strong. Of course, he has a great technical ability on the ball. His forward passing against United was exceptional. I just feel, I kind of feel for the guys at the moment. I really do. I can't ask for any more sometimes. But I just know when we come up against the Watfords and the Swanseas, you got to remember that the first half of the season we've had all the top teams at home, and we got home games now where we're going to really have to rack up the points. And I think the team has shown that it has everything it needs. Just a little bit of luck here and there, we'll be okay.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Alan Pardew and Wayne Hennessy had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Chelsea. but make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against Watford. So thanks for listening, have a very Merry Christmas, and remember to up the Palace.